All right, Leanne, I've got 12 o'clock. Take it away.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Leanne West, and I'm Chief Engineer of Pediatric Technologies at Georgia Tech. And I want to welcome you today to the Georgia Tech Tech Talk series. We're going to be talking with GloShield, with Jackson Medical about GloShield to learn more about their product and how they got to where they are now. If you want, during the process, feel free to type in some questions along the way, and we'll try to get to all of them at the end of the discussion. And now I want to let Jackson Medical introduce themselves. So James, maybe you can start.
All right, so I'm James Rains. I'm a faculty member at Georgia Tech in the biomedical engineering department. Previous to that, I had worked at Stryker and Smith & Nephew for a long period. And now I've been a part of Jackson Medical with Kamal. We co-founded it about 4 or 5 years ago, and I lead the effort along with Kamal, and excited to be here today.
All right, Kamal.
Hey everyone, Kamal McNajer from Jackson Medical here. Georgia Tech graduate from the Masters in Biomedical Innovation and Development program. Co-founded Jackson Medical with James here in 2016. Since then, just been serving as, managing the operations day to day, as well as with sales support also. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great. So I want to just start with a description of what GloShield is at kind of a high level so people know what you're talking about when we go through the rest of our questions. So maybe Kamal, do you want to talk about what GloShield is and what it does?
Yeah, absolutely. GloShield in and of itself is a patient safety device, and that's really been our focus for Jackson Medical overall. We can get into definitely a little bit more of the details about the unmet clinical need and stuff, but ultimately it's risk management for us. By mitigating risk, we're increasing patient safety in the ORs. That's how we're able to do it with GloShield.
Okay, so this solution that you came up with, that started in the classroom, right?
Yes, it actually was brought to our attention that this was a clinical problem by Dr. Garcia. He's a pediatric urologist. So he brought the problem to the capstone program, and we had a team work on it, and they kind of started the seed, if you will. They came up with a solution, and they didn't want to carry it on any further. And so Kamal and I kind of had the opportunity to look at that problem and take it in a slightly different direction. But that was, kind of how it all came about.
Okay, great. And so how did you start to explore these potential solutions to the problem that you were given?
So Kamal.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say for us, we took a very classic design-based approach where we started divergently thinking about all these different potential solutions, really focusing in on the unmet need. And for us, to kind of bring it all back together with the context of GloShield, mainly for us, these fiber optic light cables are used all the time in minimally invasive procedures, and the tips of these cables get to like 500 degrees. And so, that's a huge fire and safety risk for patients and for staff. And so when we started the design process, we started thinking about, all right, what are some different types of mechanisms or different ways we can kind of shield this heat? And ultimately, we started going down this route about selecting the right materials that would be effective at such high temperatures and that are stable and still medical grade and still safe to use. So we took a divergent approach, then converged it and started iterating and prototyping very regularly. Every week we were doing a couple of prototypes, molding sessions and things like that. And I think by the time we ended up launching, we had done about 30 or 40 iterations of our design.
Okay. Yeah, it sometimes takes a lot to get to a prototype that you like. James, did you want to add anything to that?
No, Kamal really hit it. I think a lot of people fall in love with their first idea, and that's what they think they're going to launch with, but it really goes through a lot of evolutions by evaluating it, getting feedback from people, testing it. It goes through a lot of changes. So what your first idea is usually not what it looks like when it goes to market.
Yeah, I agree. So Kamal, maybe can you tell us how you started identifying opportunities for innovation? Can you all talk to that?
Yeah, definitely. So when coming out of the master's program, very regularly I was in the ORs, just shadowing clinicians and contacts I had made. And I think that immersing yourself in that kind of environment and just being open to, even the most minute little inconveniences, just writing those down and assessing them, all the way to the bigger key issues that deal with patient outcomes. Just being open-minded to seeing and observing what's going on in the ORs and what's going on in the healthcare space. That was super helpful, and just taking a very regimented approach, thinking about the market, thinking about what kind of impact a technology or a solution can make, not only for the patient, but for the healthcare system as a whole.
Yeah, so James, maybe you can respond to that too, just because I know you're maybe coming at it from a little different angle than Kamal.
Well, it's really just in the interviewing and talking to people, you're looking for those workarounds that he kind of mentioned. What are the things that they do that'll make the procedure a little bit faster? And what are the pain points that they experience? And so when we go and do our observations, they may do something that's just normal to them, that it takes 15 minutes to do a certain procedure. And we'll look at it and say, well, that seems like that's an opportunity to make an improvement. And so sometimes the clinician or the healthcare providers, they're a little biased, right? Because they're so focused on what they're doing that they can't see the bigger picture. And that's what's nice about doing these clinical observations, is we're able to see it from a different perspective and identify opportunities to make an improvement.
Good. Yeah, I know that when I talk to clinicians and nurses and anybody, they really have a lot of ideas themselves about things that frustrate them in the clinic. And, how can we do that better? And as engineers, we come at it looking completely differently than they do. And we see a lot of things that they can't even see because they're just so used to doing it the same way over sometimes.
Right. And they've employed these workarounds. Like we said, I mean, nurses are fantastic at coming up with new solutions that are temporarily, they work well, but that's an opportunity to make a real product instead of it just being a workaround.
They're very creative.
Yeah, very creative.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so after you all had the idea and, maybe even a design in your head, what was really the next step that you need to take to try to bring a product forward and, get that prototype going? What do you need to do?
Yeah, so after kind of design is locked in, I think what's important is keeping in mind what are the next phases that are central to your business succeeding or your company succeeding. And so for us and for all medical devices, it's really honing in on the value that you're providing and making sure that the unmet clinical need you're solving is truly there, that clinical needs are being met, and that the decision-making process is being identified early on, so that as you continue to commercialize and develop your product, you're catering to that final commercialization step of actually selling into the market. And so for us, I think we're fortunate in the Atlanta area to have so many resources around us and available to us, everywhere from GCMI to help out with phase 0 activity, Coulter Venture Lab to help us out with value propositions and what our business should look like, GRA to provide business direction. We even went to ATDC for sales mentoring. I'm not a salesperson, so you got to start somewhere. And folks at GTRC to help out with IP, and we've got Grace Powers and Powers Regulatory Consulting to help us out with our regulatory pathway identification. So a lot of folks in and around the area that are the experts, and we've been so happy and fortunate to be working with them.
Yeah, just to chime in on that, I mean, early on, figuring out the business aspect of it, because engineers were really good at the technology side of it. And we really fall in love with the technology and how great it is and innovative, but that's just a small fraction of doing a business. And so it's understanding the points Kamal brought up. It's understanding who your customers are, right? And what's attractive to them and what are they willing to pay? Are they willing to pay for that? And so we spent a lot of time really because of people like Harold Solomon at Venture Lab. He really coached us on things we should be looking for. And then the people at what's now Biolocity, but it was Coulter at the time, they really pushed us to make sure that we were talking to the right people and asking the right questions. And so they really pushed us in the right area to make sure we were talking to clinicians and talking to purchasers and making sure we understood the value analysis committee. So it was, to Kamal's point too, there's just a lot of great resources here in the Atlanta area. And so we're very fortunate to be able to reach out to all these different ones that could provide different resources for us and help push us forward.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of resources here, and they're all great ones because they all help you fill in a piece of the puzzle, I think, in trying to take something forward. They all serve a little bit different purpose, but when you get them all together, it really provides you what you need, I think. Okay, so James, what questions do researchers and innovators have to answer at the earliest stages of their commercialization pathway?
I mean, to me, what they really need to answer is, am I solving the right problem? Okay, so again, this goes back to people will fall in love with ideas that they come up with. That doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's going to buy it. And so they need to go and explore that further. That's actually the number one reason that a startup fails, is that you're solving the wrong problem. So it's really making sure that you are asking those questions and talking to those people. There's a program called I-Core, which a lot of people do. And if you do complete I-Core, you have a higher chance of getting some additional funding from the government. And so I really encourage people to look at that I-Core, but it is structured so that you just spend time on really exploring and developing and validating your business model, which is, will somebody pay to use our product? And so it's really, to me, it's solving the right problem.
And to add to that, I think it goes beyond just who the purchasers are, who the end users are. There's a lot of other folks in the healthcare space that have touch points to your product as well. I think for us, early on, we were focused on really just kind of the surgeons, but when we got into the ORs and we started validating everything, we saw, hey, the surgical tech's going to be the person who's going to put the GloShield onto the light cable before the surgeon even walks into the room. We need to start talking to them. We need to start talking to the circulating nurses, right? If there's not a GloShield in the OR, do they know, or where do they want the product to be in the core space? Even these little tiny decisions like that, it's important to have a clear picture of all of that. And so it goes beyond just talking to your customer, but looking at the entire product journey in the hospital space.
Yeah, I know that it's definitely not just the person who's going to use it in the surgery room. It's purchasing for the hospital, or so many different levels who are really your customer that you may not realize in the beginning when you're designing something.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And to add on to that too, is you can have a line of people who love your product and say, yes, we want to use it. And that does not mean that it's going to be used at that hospital. And Kamal even has stories, right, where he gets it approved at a hospital, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to buy it. So it's a lot of work just to get the hospital to approve it. But getting people to actually pull the trigger on buying it is a whole separate aspect to it.
And so how do you identify the people who can make the decision to buy it to where it does get to be used?
Yeah, so for us, we're in an interesting area where we're primarily dealing with patient safety. And for us, our product isn't specialty agnostic. It's not only for urology or only for general surgery. So for us, our decision makers are really the directors of the ORs, and they're at a high enough vantage point that they're involved in value analysis. They're involved with working with supply chain and finance directors and folks like that. And so for us, those are our folks that we ask, and they're sometimes our biggest supporters because they're managing patient safety day in and day out with surgical operations in general.
And I know that you all have a clinician working with you, and he's not able to be here today, but I think it's important to talk about the early involvement of a clinician in what you're doing and the importance of that. James, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, when we first went to Coulter, we asked for some financial support and some guidance. And, the first thing they said is, well, who's your clinical partner? And we said, well, we don't really have one. And they said, well, you come back and talk to us once you have one. And they have a really good point. If you don't have somebody who can contribute to the team that's giving you the clinical perspective, then you're really missing out on a key component of it. So having Dr. Cozen, he really brought some insights that we just were not aware of, things we didn't consider. And he gave us great feedback on how the product is used in surgery, but also the things Kamal brought up, right? But where are things stored? How's it processed? Who's responsible for buying it? What are the issues? How are complaints done? I mean, he gave us insight to this whole world that we just were not aware of. So you can learn by talking to people and observing, but really having somebody on your team who's giving you great feedback. We had really actionable feedback from Spencer And we were able to incorporate that into our design, and it really made a difference in our product. So it's fantastic, and everybody should really push to have a partnership on your team that has a clinical person involved.
We pride ourselves on having a product that's super simple and easy to use, and Dr. Kozing was very much involved early in the process to make sure from a usability engineering perspective that this product was seamless from a workflow perspective, integrating into the regular workflow and not disrupting too much of their day-to-day and how their surgeries normally operate.
Yeah, I mean, because sometimes people might think that the solution is just the idea you have to solve the problem, but really you have to think about the workflow of the person who's going to be using it, and does it fit into that as well? So knowing those types of things is really, really important, I think.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about some of the people you talked to really early, or actions you took really early to help bring along the GloShield development.
I would say one of the first ones that we did was working with GCMI. They have so they're, for people who don't know, it's the Global Center for Medical Innovation, and it's right adjacent to Georgia Tech. But they work with companies and inventors and trying to help them develop their idea to commercialization. And they help with different aspects of it. But they helped us with something that's called Phase 0. And so that is evaluating the idea. And so they stepped in and helped us with design iterations, evaluating the market, understanding the regulatory aspect of it, the intellectual property. And so a lot of different things they were able to chime in and help us with. But really what was a big value really at that time was the prototyping, the early prototyping and concepts that they came up with. It was really valuable to us. So that was one on top of the Coulter program. That was really valuable, the insights that they gave us. Kamal, do you have some others?
Yeah, it's just those resources I mentioned before. There's such a wealth of information that's around you. You just need to kind of go out and take advantage of it and find the right experts who are willing to help.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'll just add for GCMI, so it's the Global Center for Medical Innovation, and they really do help almost hold your hand through the whole process, whatever piece of the process you need to do, I think. So, and that's a resource that's available to anybody. It's not just Georgia Tech. It's anyone around the world. So it's not even just Atlanta. And so I think that, you know, if you want to learn more about them, we can definitely put that information on the website when we post this video for later for people to be able to tap into, because I think they are a really, really great and needed resource. It's in the early stages, especially of something that's, you need the physical prototype that you can test in the hospital.
Right. And one thing I should say too is like the people that work there have experience, years of experience of doing this. And so they can help you with all the different aspects of it. And if they don't have the expertise, they helped us in introducing us to other people who do, like Grace Powers. So that for regulatory, we actually work with her, but that came through GCMI.
Yeah, definitely. If they're not the right people, they know the right people.
Right.
So it's great to interact with a group like that from the beginning.
Yeah.
So what is easy to overlook in a development process? I know you talked about something being fatal earlier, but what else, what could you maybe not notice at the beginning of trying to develop a solution?
Well, I think every step of the way, there's something that you could miss out on. Making the wrong step. It's every aspect. It's the regulatory, you know, getting the wrong class. That could be it. It can be in sales, not understanding the right business model. There's so many different aspects of it. The development, the testing, every single phase of it, I felt like we could have made the wrong step. But to me, the most important part is not the technology development, which I think is going to surprise everybody. I think everybody thinks it's all about the engineering, but it's really about the sales and understanding the right pricing, who's going to buy it, how do you get them to see the value in it, and that whole process. Kamal, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think just in general, just purely from a project management perspective, everything always ends up costing more and taking more time. So just things to keep in mind when you're you know, creating, when you're just planning everything out, right? Just be aware that, you know, it's going to take a little bit longer. It's going to cost a little bit more, and you just have to kind of roll with the punches.
Yeah. Somebody has a question
Absolutely.
actually that kind of ties into that, Kamal. I don't know if you see that, but it said, how close did your actual milestones line up with your original plan, which really ties into what you're talking about? Do you want to speak about
Sure, yeah.
that? What were some surprises?
Yeah, definitely. So, for the most part, early stage, being able to work with folks like GCMI and the resources like, Venture Lab and folks around us and Coulter and Biolocity, that was great because we were able to kind of stay on track as best as we could within reason. For us, we had a relatively unforeseen delay when we got into manufacturing. I think we've always heard, right, when you get into manufacturing, expect delays, and that's just how things go. When you start off with doing a design transfer and you go through your prototype molding and you get into your production molding, you're doing process control and all this other stuff. And so for us, thankfully, we have fantastic contract manufacturing partners that worked with us and helped address that delay and really try to lock in, hey, we have a delay, we have to redo tooling. Here's what the new outlook looks like, whether it's a couple months down the road. They really did work with us to make sure that we were able to kind of dial that back in and meet our business objectives as well.
Yeah, the manufacturing, that is something people don't really appreciate how long it'll take, because when you go to a company, it takes a long time just to get them ready to be able to manufacture it. And I think our original plan, I don't know if you remember, Kamal, we wanted to launch in January and we launched in July.
Yeah, 4th of July. That's right.
4th of July, we were here doing quality inspection.
Yeah.
So that we could launch and send product out to Mayo. Yeah.
Although I think that 6 months is not a terribly long delay in the grand scheme of things.
No.
No,
pretty well.
No, it's not. But it always takes manufacturing. Even now, when we order new product, it takes longer than what you sometimes would think it would.
Just schedule some buffer time. That's the best advice.
Yeah, you always got to buffer that one, and it takes you more money.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Absolutely. And so for the person out there who might have an idea, what would you say, what advice would you give them just starting out with their new idea? What did they maybe need to look at in the very beginning?
Kamal, Neva. Yeah, I think at the very beginning, right? If you've got an idea, start talking to customers. See if you can get yourself connected to the Emorys or the Piedmonts or the Grady's of the world that are in and around Atlanta, or if you're calling from another city, wherever you're at. Being able to validate that clinical need and being able to get that customer insight and then doing that voice of customer exercise early on is incredibly beneficial, and that should definitely be the next step, if not the first step, when you're developing and designing a technology.
Yeah, and also looking into intellectual property too. You can come up with some great ideas, but you need to make sure that you have the opportunity to be innovative, because somebody else may already occupy that space. And so you need to determine if you're going to do some design arounds or if you need to license what they have. So that's another aspect of it to look into, on top of regulatory, because there's a big difference between having a class 1 product, a class 2 product, and if you go to a class 3, you are talking about adding years and tens of millions of dollars to your project. So we are fortunate enough we're a class 1 product. So our regulatory pathway is much simpler than something that would be like a class 2. And all of that has huge impact on time and money.
Yeah, and I know we've mentioned a couple of Georgia specific resources, but I'm sure if you're coming at this from another state, that there are similar resources in your area to be able to look up to see, who is there another Georgia Research Alliance type partner that you could find in your area to help bring that technology forward?
Yes.
So what about, we talk about the regulatory a little bit, and you said your pathway was much easier. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like to work with the FDA?
The FDA, I think most people would be surprised. The FDA has actually been really supportive and engaging. I think people see them as being behind this wall and they're only located in DC, but actually, no, they have offices all over the place. And we just called them up and we've had several conversations with them. They were actually really supportive, gave us feedback, they communicated with us. So we actually had a very positive experience. And so they actually want to help you. So their job is to help you.
And I would even plug, I think the acronym is DICE on FDA's website for device industry and consumer education. There's a hotline you can call and just get some of your basic questions answered. And they're more than happy to pick up the phone and explain and get you connected to the right folks at FDA to be able to help you out with some of the questions and get some clarification on what you're looking for.
Yeah, I will say all my dealings with the FDA have been very, very positive.
Yeah.
They're very willing to talk to you and help you along the way, whatever you need to make the device work.
Yeah, they're actually your advocate. I mean, they want to help you. So it's not adversarial. It's actually really good.
Exactly. So Paul, I'm going to ask you, has there been any questions that we might want to answer in these last few minutes?
Yep, there are a couple.
Okay.
One is, and thanks, James, by the way, for grabbing the one that you mentioned earlier. I marked that one off. What was the largest gap in your understanding of how to successfully start a new company? What do you wish you knew before you started Jackson Medical? And I imagine that's for both James and Kamal, but I think you're going to have different perspectives. What was the gap in understanding of how to start a new company, and what do you wish you knew before?
Okay, so I worked in industry for 13 years before I worked at Georgia Tech. So I worked at Stryker and I worked at Smith and Nephew, and I worked in a very big organization, and I knew a lot about R&D. So I knew about a little bit about manufacturing and quality, and I knew that aspect of it. What I didn't appreciate really fully, it was the sales and the business aspect of it. So I tell people I learn something every week. I feel like every week I'm learning something brand new. It's not just on the business side as far as sales, but it's, how to create your corporate structure. How does that get done? All the agreements that you have to do, the legal aspects of it. It's how to shipping things. It's how to do invoices and purchase orders. So I feel like there is a mountain of stuff I didn't know, and there's still way more things I don't know. But it was really all about the business side of it. And sales, I would say, would be the biggest part. And that actually is the most critical part, in my opinion, is sales. And so I think we were really good at the engineering side of it and how to do the quality, how to do testing and development. We were really strong in that. But we leaned on a lot of different people, some of our advisors and things like that, for helping us understand the areas that we do not really have a good handle on. And we continue to lean on them. Common, do you have some additional thoughts?
Yeah, for me, I think really the sales part, that's what we're in right now. And that's something if I'm looking back, I wish I paid a little bit more attention to, got more familiar with what the processes and options look like for that. For us and for any device or technology in general, I think getting to a stage when when you have it fully design locked, that's always a big hurdle. Then the next step is, getting it out to manufacturing, making sure it's manufacturable, that, you can produce in scale and in volume. That's the next challenge. And then the next challenge right after that is scaling with sales. And so having at least, some forecasted kind of strategy in place to be able to help out with that and to foresee that up front is always very good. And then, for us, I think we've done a good job of just keeping an open mind and being open to being a little bit flexible in terms of our strategy. If things don't work out, what can we pivot to? What can we identify as a new option that we can try out and see and test and do a little bit of A/B testing here and there. So just being coachable and being flexible enough to pivot is something that we've done a pretty good job at.
Yeah. Having the humility to know that you don't know all the answers, I think is really important. And so I think Kamal and I both know that we don't know a lot. And so that's why we are always reaching out to people and asking. And we're lucky enough that we have people like Harold Solomon. I mean, that's a guy we can call up today and he will just give us all this great advice that we're going to take. And we have just surrounded ourselves with great people that are experienced and really willing to help. So we're very fortunate.
I will add that I think realizing that you're not going to know everything, there are so many pieces of the puzzle, and knowing that you need to be coachable, that was a really good point, I think, and knowing that you need to ask for help because you're going to need somebody else's help along the way to do this. It isn't just about making that initial prototype that solves the problem. There's a whole lot of other pieces to the puzzle that come into play there.
there was one other question, and Leanne, this one's actually mine. You guys mentioned Dr. Kozin and a clinical partner. How would a novice, go about recruiting a clinical partner? These are doctors in the OR. They're busy. They got families. They travel. They may be board members elsewhere. How do you recruit a clinical partner, and what's involved, including compensation?
Okay, that's a good question. So I can just kind of really tell you my experience. And so we were not actually looking for a clinical partner at the time. We were just going out and trying to learn more about the problem. So we were observing and talking with a lot of doctors. And what happened was we just started we hit it off with a few doctors, but Dr. Kozin was the person we hit it off with the most. He was giving us some great feedback, things to consider, and he was getting really excited. So he resonated with the clinical problem and then our solution. We actually didn't even show him the solution the first time we met with him. That was something later on. So he was excited about the problem. And then when we later showed him the idea that we had, he started chiming in with ideas and suggestions. And so we just kind of got the ball rolling and started getting excited that way. And as far as, so we just kind of built it from there. So we were lucky. And so I would recommend, if you're going to pull somebody into your group, make sure they're a good personality fit. Okay. Because if you're going to be working with them for the long term, you got to enjoy working with them.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that was one thing. But as far as compensation, that's a more trickier and deeper discussion to have. People have different structures. Well, they will give equity to somebody who serves like in an advisory role. Sometimes you're going to pay them. Sometimes these people will get involved as investors and you're giving them equity. The only comment I will say is you need to be careful about giving out equity and making sure that you're valuing it right. And if you're going to do it as a sweat equity, meaning you're just paying them for the effort that they're putting in to contribute to your goal, is that you want to put in a 1-year cliff. Okay, that's pretty standard, but not everybody knows about it. But you normally do it so it's over like a 4-year period that they're accruing more equity to a certain cap, but you don't want to give somebody equity right off the bat when they really haven't done anything. You want to put in milestones that they're helping you achieve these milestones. And then after a year, if they're still around, then that means they're probably helping you get toward those goals. Then you can start giving them equity.
Yeah, I agree. I think having the clinician is very important to understand not only the problem better, but the workflow that we mentioned before. And then also, I think that they play a role when you're trying to get your idea out there, because they know all the other people out there, other places, hospitals around the country that do this same type of procedure. So I think that they're also really helpful from that regard.
No, that is a great point. We always see this when we go and talk to investors or outside people. When I talk about a clinical problem, it doesn't really resonate with them. No. When Dr. Kozin comes in, he can say the same exact words and they're raptured. They're like, oh my gosh, this is really a problem. And so his words carry much more weight because he's talking to them from the clinical perspective as a buyer, as a user. And so it is great to have a clinical person to kind of validate what you're talking about. So that and Leanne's right. When we go to talk to other hospitals and we bring him in with us, they will listen to what he has to say about it. And they can talk the same language. They're talking shop. And so it is very useful to have.
Absolutely. So Paul, I know we're coming up on our time. If there are no more questions, then I think we can wrap it up for today. Are there any more questions, Paul?
Not that I'm seeing, so please continue.
Okay, good. So thank you very much for being here today, James and Kamal. This was great, great discussion. And for those of you out there watching, if you have any other questions that you think of after the fact, please email Sherry Russell at Sherry, SHERI.Russell, RUSSELL at Georgia Tech, GATECH.edu. And we can try to get those questions answered when we post this video for viewing later for other people.
Thank you, Leanne.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Good day.
Bye.